So I'm clearly responsible and didn't film any of the patterning and cutting out of the pieces, but all the pieces are what you see in the elven robe I created like 4 weeks ago. Um, exact same pattern, exact same collar shape, exact same pieces. So McCall's, and it's a Franken pattern. I used silk from Silk Baron for the outside, and there is no interlining, and the Dupioni lining is from Etsy. So we started with seaming up the panels, and then this is me seaming up the sleeve. The sleeve itself is lined separately from the actual garment itself, just because that's the easiest for me. And then what we do is we just overlock and serge the seams because silk frays. And then I add a little like top stitch hem here, kind of crude, but it does the flattening job, which is all I needed to do. And then here is a little detail of the fact that I had to do some piecing. Piecing is totally cool. Yeah, here's the lining. The lining itself is just felled in as this. Yeah, this took a little bit longer than I had ever expected it to do, because I definitely screwed up 1 or 2 times too many. But yeah, everything's just felled in, and I didn't realize how badly silk wrinkles, but holy crap, does it wrinkle poorly. I'll be talking a little bit. Okay, so yeah, here, this is a long clip, so I'm going to talk about the trim that I forgot to film. The trim is from Etsy, you'll see it later. It was I bought about 8 yards and still have 2 yards left over. So I used about 6 yards of trim to trim from the top of the collar to the bottom of the hem and all the way, so it just goes all the way around the big large circle I'm talking about. So I added a bit of a dust ruffle here. The dust ruffle itself is more so just a strip of fabric at the bottom of the hem, where the hem touches the floor just to protect it with an extra layer. I actually just felled this in entirely because I'm me and I don't like the machine. Also, it would be kind of hard to do it with a machine at this point in time. Yeah, just done the small felling stitches. It's a little bit of extra dupioni, and it's just there to collars. So this collar itself is just based on the crown collar I created for the elven robe. Silk likes to scar, so for me to pad stitch the silk would have been kind of a bad idea, and so I opted for the option of just basting along the lines and along seam. And then we have to top stitch, sew the collar, and get the collar attached to the garment, which is more so just usual fare in this sense. Alright, now I'll talk about the belt. So this is just sort of the finishing detail on it. I'm talking about how I actually did it in a second, just for a little bit of reference. So the belt itself is like basically a strip of fabric with a tiny little thing at the bottom. And then I just sewed up the sides, and now I'm going to show you how I do boning channels, because Anakin is dramatic enough to own a corset. The boning I get is from Joann's actually right now, because I'm still shopping Joann's kind of shamelessly. And what I do is I just cut it to size using a single strip, and then make sure that I have enough of a seam allowance, sort of like, so I can fold it up and over and be fine to hem it, which all the hemming is done by hand, and then do to the boning channels. The next thing we do is we have the chalk. Chalk comes out, I barely use chalk. And we just trace the boning channel, we trace a second boning channel, so that I know where to sew on these things, because I will not be using bias tape, I'll be just sewing the channels into said belt. Bias tape. The next thing we have ambulances, or whatever we're naming the voiceover. So the next thing we've got is we have the side belts the exact same way. There's a lot of ambulances. God, this is insane. Yes, hello. There's a dog. Okay. So yeah, it was the same thing. We're just watching it go. Same concept. And then we cut them and we snip them all to size as I cut from one singular. So then I added bias taping edging due to the fact the garment can no longer be put onto the machine due to the boning channels. The bias tape is done by hand. And that is totally fine and totally valid and super okay. I honestly like doing it. So then for the very textured fabric that I added on top, I just felled in like basically a strip of it, inspired and based on the obi sashes you see on most all of the Jedi belts. Just sort of done in a more elegant and fancy and Sanderish way, which is textured, heavily decorated, and kind of ridiculous, which is totally valid and totally fine. Alright, we got our next step, which is just covering all of the boning channels into and with bias tape. This was just a lot of stitching through things. Alright, and then to do the eyelet holes, I did not use metal grommets, I just used stitching instead, which are more of the medieval sort of techniques to do eyelets, but they feel safer for me instead of using metal. So what I do is I use an awl, and then I shove the aglet through as much as I possibly can to get a hole that's big enough to shove an aglet through. This takes quite some time, but yeah. take a needle and I just run whip stitches all the way across. Alright, I'm going to talk about the problem situation for 2 seconds. I didn't film any of this because it was all experimental. Like, I don't know how to do foam. I actually don't know how to do foam or any of that. What you're seeing is you're just seeing 2 things of foam stacked on top, biased edged edges, and then a very long strip of fabric. And you'll see this all in 2 seconds. There we go. The final reveal of this framework is just sort of, here is how it looks currently. It needs a lot of decoration, embroidery, painting, lots of gold edging, but for what I have currently is pleasing and it works. So the polygon situation itself is also a bit empty and lacking, but this can also happen later. There's not really much else to say other than just, here is the first step to making and crafting a original design cosplay. It's just outer robes, all that fun stuff. So join me for part 2 for the tunic, and enjoy the rest of the